Hello, this is Patrick Barnard in Montreal. It is April 11, 2025. This is the 11th International Press Review, and today I'm going to look at the Chinese view of Trump and his tariffs. Today we know, it's just recent, that China will be raising its tariffs against the United States to 125% in response to America's announcement this week that its tariffs on Chinese imports into the United States will be 145%. But we're going to look at the Chinese view. This edition of the International Press Review will attempt to give you, by looking at a series of media platforms, a view of how the Chinese view this trade war between China and the United States. Today, on Friday, April 11, 2025, Jonathan Cheng, the bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal in China, made a very interesting statement. He was reporting from Shanghai. He said that the Chinese have in fact been waiting for this kind of showdown for a very long time, and that they have a lot of tools in their toolbox. Yonden Latu is the managing editor for content in the South China Morning Post. That's a newspaper in Hong Kong. It's been around a long time, founded at the very beginning of the 20th century. Latu posted in his paper and elsewhere a very interesting, ironic piece. It's called An Idiot's Guide to Trump's Tariffs, and it gives you an idea of the serious irony with which the Chinese are viewing this affair.
Why an idiot's guide? Because, as painfully obvious as it is, some people just don't get it, or refuse to.
Then very simply, you will have to pay a tariff, differing amounts, but a tariff which will direct hundreds of billions of dollars and even trillions of dollars into our treasury.
While Trump brandishes the threat of tariffs like a bull with a bazooka in a china shop, nobody dares correct him on how they actually work. No, he will not be raking it in from the countries he slaps his tariffs on. That's just not how it works. School children should know this, let alone the ruler of the most powerful empire in human history. I suppose it's up to the child now to point out the emperor's nudity. Let's break it down in the simplest possible terms, taking tariffs aimed at China as the example. Americans depend heavily on all kinds of products from China: smartphones, digital automation systems, toys, media transmission systems, lithium batteries, display monitors, computer parts, and plastic goods, to name but a few. Any tariffs on these Chinese goods will be paid by the American companies importing them, not the Chinese companies sending them across. None of the Chinese exporters shipping these staples out of their country will pay a red cent more. It's the American importers who will pay the tariffs for the goods at the port of entry, and they will pass on the cost to American retailers, who in turn will have to raise prices for American consumers. So yes, Trump may well earn some revenue for the Treasury from his tariffs, but effectively by taxing Americans. Ultimately, shutting Chinese companies out by slapping tariffs on their goods that US importers can't afford will require other trade partners to fill the void. But replacing China as the source will be no piece of cake, especially when Trump is threatening everyone else and their mums with similar tariffs.
That is Londen Yatu of the South China Morning Post. The Web says that he was born actually in Darjeeling, India. He's been in Hong Kong for a long time, widely regarded there. Sometimes his views are considered to be close to that of the Chinese government, but that's what we're trying to get at in this press review. Just to give you an idea of how deeply Chinese pride and sense of self has been affected by this trade war. There's a woman called Mao Ning. She is from Hunan, said to be part of the Mao clan, but that's not confirmed in any way. She works for the foreign ministry. She has a degree from an American university as well as her Chinese training. She said this week, China is not afraid of provocation. We are Chinese. We do not fear threats. We do not back down. And to make her point, she put up a video of a speech by Mao Zedong in the middle of the Korean War.
以后是由爱是好爱，或者美国的将来的什么政坛由他们去决定。就是说，他们要打多久就打多久。一直打到环境。
By using that short video of Mao's speech back in the 1950s, Ma Ning of Beijing's foreign ministry was delivering the message, China will never give in, China will not capitulate. We are now, by the way, at Saturday, April 12th, and today, Donald Trump made another about-face. He exempted a whole series of electronic industries in the United States from the enormous tariff that he's been threatening to use against China. And there's a reason for this. Trump's reversal over the weekend and sudden exemption of tariffs on certain electronic products coming from China illustrates a number of things that were very clear last week. Number one, the uncertainty of the tariffs and their effect is having a terrible impact on U.S. equities, as we saw this past week. Number two, not only are stocks shaky, but the bond market is also shaky. Fact number three, companies like Apple that depend heavily on China went down by about 15% in the stock market. These are the reasons why Trump has suddenly produced this exemption. I read the UK's Financial Times on a regular basis. Here you're seeing a photo of the front page of this weekend's edition. Trump tariffs poised to drive U.S. inflation to 4%, Fed warns. I am going to read the last two paragraphs of this cover story in the Financial Times. They make reference to the Yale Budget Lab, a tremendous service to the public carried out by economists at Yale University. Here are these paragraphs. Retailers across the U.S. are preparing to raise prices within 2 weeks as the Chinese tariffs come into force, according to the Budget Lab at Yale University. Even the remaining 10% blanket levy on other global imports will raise prices 2.9%, costing the average household $4,700 each year, the Policy Research Center estimated. Here's two reports from Beijing this week. One is from Xinhua, the wire service. The other is from the People's Daily. They're really much the same. They're from the Finance Ministry, the Commerce Department, and also the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Basically, I see this as a twofold message. One, to the United States, don't bully, don't try and pulverize people in an ugly way. Second message, but negotiate. I'm going to read two sections of the Xinhua story. China takes firm countermeasures against U.S. tariff bullying. One of these sections comes from a spokesperson of China's Ministry of Commerce. Quote, I want to emphasize that there's no winner in a trade war. And China does not want a trade war, but the Chinese government will by no means sit by when the legitimate rights and interests of its people are being hurt and deprived. Close quote. The official, the agency report said that the United States' use of tariffs as a weapon to exert maximum pressure and pursue its self-interests is a typical act of unilateralism, protectionism, and economic bullying. Now, the other part of the article includes quotes from a foreign ministry spokesperson, Lin Jian, and Lin Jian said, quote, if the United States really seeks to resolve the issue through dialogue and negotiation, it should demonstrate an attitude of equality, respect, and reciprocity. If the United States is bent on waging a tariff war or trade war, China is ready to fight to the end, close quote. We're now at Sunday on this weekend, and there's further very ambiguous news from the United States. It's extremely unclear about what Trump is doing now with these tariffs. But let's assume that they are very high, both on the Chinese and the American side. Then trade between China and the United States will be virtually blocked. Now, what that means for China is that a lot of goods that were produced for the US market will begin to accumulate. China's got to be very careful not to dump them. Xi Jinping has seen the head of the Spanish government in Beijing, and then he's going to Southeast Asia. He's also made overtures to Europe, to the European Union, to Canada. So he is finding other people to deal with. This edition of the International Press Review is going to end with two economists, one Asian and one Canadian. The Asian person is a very brilliant young female economist called Keiyu Jin. Keiyu Jin is the daughter of a very well-known Chinese economist and politician. She went to high school in New York City. She got her PhD from Harvard. She is the author of a very well-known book called The New China Playbook, Beyond Socialism and Capitalism. And she's just recently written an article called If Trump is Trying to Suppress China, He's Going About It All Wrong. Her argument is that if Trump really wanted to keep China down, he would encourage China to keep producing at the low end of things. Instead, she thinks that his tariffs are actually stimulating China to change very deeply. As she puts it, although China's most urgent economic challenge remains internal, 125% U.S. tariffs give Beijing a clear pretext to act, to stimulate aggressively, subsidize strategically, sharpen its survival instinct, and double down on technological supremacy. If Washington's aim is to suppress China's rise, it's going about it all wrong. This 11th edition of the International Press Review will end with the comments of a Canadian economist called Jim Stanford. He is the director of the Center for Future Work in Vancouver. He's a trade union economist in his own past, and he was recently on the CBC's Power and Politics with David Cochrane. Here is Jim Stanford.
He's over his head the way he's trying to pick a schoolboy fight with China on this. You know, you punch me, I'm going to punch you harder. That's literally what his press secretary said today. And China doesn't need America. He can sign deals with Zimbabwe and Cambodia and even Israel and wave his hands and say, look what a success this strategy has been. China's a different ballgame. China doesn't even need the exports that like they did in the past. And China's a superpower and literally has said, we will fight this to the end. And you should believe them more than you believe anything that comes out of Trump's mouth. And this, to me, is a sign that we're heading into very, very dangerous waters, not just for the economy.